Just to let you know, from our perspective, this is far and away the most common use case for conversational platforms. Far and away, probably 65, 70% of the calls I take are about implementing a customer service chatbot. It is, good that we're talking about this. I'll ask the panel members to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. So, Mehmet.
Hi, I'm Mehmet Orgut, and I'm working at BizOps teams at Turo. And my main responsibility is going around finding new technologies to increase efficiency and the customer satisfactions of the company.
Good afternoon. My name is Nikos Ioannou, and I'm leading conversational user interactions for TurboTax at Intuit. That includes IVR experiences and also a newly experienced, it's a TurboTax Assistant, which is a chatbot experience within the TurboTax product.
And hi, everyone. I'm Paul Lasserre. I look after AI in product at Genesys. Maybe let me give you tell you what Genesys is doing, so you know the context. Genesys is helping brands like Uber, Airbnb, Emirates, to basically connect and engage with customers and prospects. So if you're an Emirates customer, you try to call the customer service of Emirates. That's our job, to connect you to the right person on the channel of your choice and help you switch from channel to channel in a seamless way.
Okay, we'll start things off by I'll let each panel member go through and kind of talk about how they're using chatbots in customer service and what the particular parameters of the use case and such are. So let's start on the end with Paul this time.
So maybe for us that's a bit different because we inject AI to build products that will help our customers to provide a better customer experience. But roughly what we hear from customers when they come and want to implement AI-powered solution, it's basically provide always better customer experiences while finding opportunities for business efficiencies. So better, smarter, and cheaper with AI.
At TurboTax, our help experience is basically scaled by search. And this year, we've been about 10 months into the journey to introduce TurboTax Assistant. About 15% of our customers get it today. And the purpose of this TurboTax Assistant is we wanted a humanized experience to actually drive more interaction into our help system. And when we need to get a customer to an agent, then we wanted to make sure we route the customer to the right agent for speed to answer. So these are kind of the main ways we are experimenting right now with the chatbot experience at TurboTax.
Yeah, we are also in the process of development right now. And two major areas that we are focusing is actually how come we can create and provide the solutions to customers in an easier and a faster way. And while doing it, how can we reduce the human error? And how can we create a more satisfying and delighting experience for our customers?
Okay. I'm going to tell a story first and then ask a question of each panel member, and after that. And this has to do with an event I was at last year where a gentleman from a gaming company, who shall remain nameless, stood up and gave a little presentation about utilizing a chatbot in the gaming platform. And the first thing out of his mouth was, "Don't bother to train your chatbot." And I'm like, this guy's an idiot. It's like, how could he start by saying that? But then he went on to talk about the fact that no matter how hard you try and no matter how much you think you've captured every possible permutation of the way that somebody can ask a question about something, you'll be lucky if you get 20%. And that's an accurate statement. Okay, it's very, very hard to envision all the different ways. So one of the things that's frustrating for us in the market is there's so many providers that are running around and so many companies that are running around that see the tools in the market that are saying, oh, these are so easy to build. And the reality is, yeah, it's very easy to build a bad chatbot. I can promise you that. But it's very, very hard to build a good one. And the notion that you can just take your call logs and drop them into a data set that you're then going to use to train your chatbot will result in a very bad chatbot. So it takes a lot more work. So given that, the question I'll ask the panel is, you know, given how hard it is to do this and do it well and create something that your customers truly are satisfied with and engage with, why should companies do this? What are the benefits that you're going to get from deploying those?
Want me to start?
Sure.
So the why, maybe step back and let's ask a question to the audience. So who recently got delighted by an experience calling your bank or insurance, hitting an IVR, press 2 for English, get transferred, repeat your problem? Okay. One. Maybe he's biased. Who believes that there is room for improvement leveraging technology for customer experience? Okay. I'm personally, that's the why. I'm a firm believer that today AI has the potential to basically fix what technology broke in the customer experience space in the first place. And when you think about it, you step back, our industry, customer service, customer experience is all about helping companies answering questions, solving issues. And it turns out that the same questions, the same issues for a given business come back very often. It's a fantastic area of application for machine learning. So chatbot, voicebot is the obvious one. It turns out, in my opinion, to be the hardest one to do well. But there are intermediary steps to get there, starting with leveraging NLU, like intent classification and entity extraction, as an NLU layer to basically understand why exactly you're calling in plain English, plain French, plain Spanish, and send you to the right queue, the right agent. Big difference with where we are today. That's about backing agent and representative with AI using the same exact technology, way less risky because you still have the control of the human. And finally, I can talk more about it, but optimizing the journey with conversational AI.
So at TurboTax, we were tasked about 10 months ago to create a chatbot experience to actually help customers do their taxes. So we knew immediately that we will not create 1 million intents and 1 million answers. That would not be scalable, and we knew from the beginning we were not going to go there. Now, we have a plethora of information in our disposal and available to us. We have millions of conversations that happen in the IVR, and they are all captured from agents and customers to answer questions. We also have millions of answers in our Answer Exchange community that experts actually answer customer questions every day. And by the way, there's tax season right now in 2 weeks for the audience. So these are happening as we speak. So we knew that in order for us to actually create that TurboTax Assistant experience, we have to leverage all that. We actually went to a journey to actually specifically focus on 3 key flows and maybe a few more that are like high topics that are in taxes very complicated, but then elevating all the great content that we get from community and all the great content that we get from our tax experts. So, and that's what we did, and that's what we're having in production right now. So we're focusing on interaction, and we're focusing on disambiguation. How do we disambiguate, understand customer intent? And if we have a flow, great. If we don't have a flow, how do we get people answers that are similar to what the customer is asking and elevate them up? The last thing that I want to point out is also routing is key for us. We're not in the business of containing context. That's not what we're about. It's kind of crazy to say that on a customer success panel because a lot of people that are building bots in the customer success, they are about containment. We're in the business of answering people's questions. So we have a customer-facing KPIs, and we want to actually speed to answer is what we measure. So getting the customer to the right agent, making sure that there is no transfers there, and arming the agent with the best information to answer the customer questions as fast as possible and as accurately, it's our success. That's what we're actually measuring.
Yeah. And one example that I can give that we are currently working on is achieving satisfying results. For example, Turo is like the car sharing marketplace, and if you think that cars are very important and for many people, and we also should be very careful while we are finding the right guest for those cars. So when we need to verify a customer, and we should do this verification on a constant manner. And for example, when a customer cannot book a car and call our call center, and if that person starts to talk with the guest experience, that guest experience agent will look at some other metrics to understand what is happening with this specific customer. But if we can feed the right data and we create a chatbot that automatically checks the specific metrics and the warning signs and say that there's a special hold on that account or on that customer, we can easily speed up the process of providing a satisfying result. And I think that will be great improvement for us in the future.
Okay. Let's move on to, how did you get started? How did you approach this? How do you get into building a customer service chatbot? We'll start with Mehmet.
Yeah. The way we approach is actually very data focused, and when we start to look at the data and start to talk with our customers, we notice three major areas. The one type of problems we consider is more FAQ type of questions. And these questions evolving around, what does Turo do? How can I make money out of this business? And these sort of questions. The second type of problems are usually more transactional. I would like to change the end date of my trip. But to be able to answer that question, we need to gather some information about the customer. And the third type of problems are, I'm disputing this reimbursement. In that point, there should be no bot interaction. That person should automatically talk directly with an agent. And the question then evolves around, what type of problems contains what type of intents, and for those specific type of intents, what sort of chatbot can we create? And we've actually currently following this type of logic to create our bot.
Okay, so it sounds like, you really focused on a fairly narrow set of interactions that you wanted to get right.
Exactly, because we need to start small. Mm-hmm. So this is a very important thing, and we want to do it at the right time, in the right way, with the right technology.
Okay. Other thoughts on?
Yeah, we started thinking that currently our search experience and the experience that we have in TurboTax Assistant, how can we get more customers to interact with it? If people don't interact with it, then we cannot help them. So can we increase interaction rate was the number one KPI we were actually looking. After that, we said, well, if people interact, then there are two other things we're trying to do. Do we understand intent classification? Do we have flows to offer answers? And most importantly, because we knew most of the times we will not hand-stitch all these answers, do we elevate the right content from all the content that we have available to our disposal? So for us, data integrations, APIs within TurboTax product, within your taxes, was actually a priority for us to even launching the pilot. So we focused on how do we get the bot to know exactly what the customer has, what the situation is, and then connecting it to our knowledge bases to say, are there relevant content out there that the bot can actually surface and help? The last thing that we actually did was actually focus specifically on the contact us flow. There's three flows that we focused on. The welcome message, interaction was important to us. What are the options that we give to the customer? The second thing is that we focused specifically was disambiguation. Can we actually build disambiguation flows to actually offer the right content? And the last thing was the contact us flow. And in the contact us flow, we made sure that an escalation is not a bad thing. An escalation is a great thing, and actually we should really surface it as early as possible if we don't have the right content to actually offer to the customer. So making sure that we provide a delightful experience from the beginning to the end was actually our focus and all our metrics around it.
And what I see, at least for our customers, is that the successful implementation come from the customer who think big but really start small. Narrow use cases, FAQ bots, easy transactional bot, and password reset or check my balance. Everything else, escalation, providing the context, the history, it's already very, very good level for most of our customers.
Okay. Yeah, our research shows that that's a good way to start. You don't want to try and do too many things. You don't want to be building the bot that's going to be able to answer every question you can imagine, because chances are good the performance is going to be pretty poor. And it's always a good practice to start small and build up from there. Let me ask you guys, you talked about increasing engagement as a measure that you look at as a KPI. What do other folks look at? I mean, what are the other measures? And then I'll tell a little story after that.
Like the top of mind that comes to me is when we apply this technology, one of the expectations is going to help us a lot to manage our costs as well. Because if we create this technology successfully, which means for us there will be less requirement for agents. And another way of saying is that our agents will be spending their time more on empathizing and finding and tailoring their statements for the customers. So this will help us in both ends. The first one will be reducing overall cost, and the second one will be more increasing the customer satisfaction. Because as we mentioned in the previous talks, we will have a chance to in the same vibe with the customers, because the agents will have more space to think about those areas.
Maybe let me tell you also a little story, is that very often when we talk about these topics with customers, the official line and talking points are, yeah, it's not about cost, that's about customer experience and the brands. And then the decision maker would come see you after and say, that'd be great for a given volume of interaction if I could only have that many agents instead of like the number I have today. So it's interesting to notice. The truth is that when you manage a contact center, management of cost is a real question, is a real matter. And at the same time, if you just look at containment, you're going to fail. Like you could fire your entire workforce and have a bad IVR and you're done. Your containment is 100%. Nobody wants to do that. So the measure of success usually are a combination of containment rate for bots, that's clear, associated with a business outcome. Could be customer satisfaction, could be upsell, cross-sell, could be retention. But you can't look at one without the other.
Yeah, in the conversations I've had with companies, almost every single company that approaches us asking about this technology but not having implemented it yet, their motivation is cost savings. They see their call volume going up in their service center, they see their cost per call increasing, and they go, we got to get these costs under control. But when I talk to companies that have had production chatbots in deployment for a long time, almost every single one of them says it's all about customer sat. So both. It's not that they're not getting cost savings; they are, and they're happy about that. But they realize that if your customers aren't satisfied with this experience, you're wasting your time implementing it. So, did you want to add?
Yeah, one thing that we actually start measuring, because we do by the way look at containment rate as an indication, is the chatbot helpful, but we make sure that our contact us flow is as frictionless as possible. But we do track what we call task completion rate. And task completion for us is that do people interact with the bot, and then do they go back in the product and they continue doing their tasks? And when we see customers do that, then we believe we actually answer the question. Because we do have thumbs up, thumbs down, and all these indications that most people build in chatbots. But when people don't get their answer, yeah, they do give us a thumbs down. When people get their answer, they move on and to their tasks, and they just move back in doing their taxes. So actually having orchestrated the whole end-to-end circle of like customers interacting, then what do they do next? And calling this a KPI for us, and actually really being paranoid about making sure that customers are going back and completing the tasks and completing their taxes, it's actually a KPI that we're tracking.
Okay. Obviously costs and reduction as well as customer sat are both important, and you got to pay attention to both of them. But invariably, chatbots are not going to be able to do everything. You got to hand off to a live agent at some point in time, or do you? I'll ask that question. Do you need to integrate with live agents? Is that critical to the success of the chatbot? And if so, let me throw an extra little spin on this by saying, how do you talk to your live agents about that? Is this workforce replacement, or is this AI taking their jobs away? How do you deal with that issue? Paul.
So you may have to stop me, because that's a topic close to my heart. So from my perspective, I don't see anytime soon an agent-less contact center. Like that works well. So the answer is yes, you need an agent, and you need a way to escalate in a good way the interactions, the right interaction to agent, whether the bot is stuck, whether the person does not want to talk to a machine, whether that's a very valuable intent that justifies to have an expert. So you need to do it, and you need to do it well. And the second question you ask is replacement of jobs. So Gartner, by the way, forecasts that in the next 5 years, the volume of interaction is going to be multiplied by 3. Okay? And yes, the productivity is going to increase in contact center, but probably not at this pace. So if anything, I don't forecast the shortage of work in contact center anytime soon. And the last point you made about agent satisfaction and morale. So early, caveat, it's early to say. Not enough deployment to have like a good view of the world. That being said, with some early customers, we see that, for instance, an anecdote in Australia, a large bank customer of Genesys, which implemented a conversational AI system, and the agents were a little bit concerned at the beginning. And what the customer found is that the agents found way more satisfaction in their job after the system was implemented. They are in the service industry, they want to help people, and they realize after the fact how painful it was before this bot took away the most mundane tasks, which was, I thought, a nice anecdote.
You guys agree? You know, you're able to automate the mundane stuff and get the better stuff to the agents?
Yeah, so at TurboTax right now, what agents love is when they get a ticket, and mostly of the assisted experience is a callback. So agents, customers create a case and then provide a wait time, and the agents call them back. So agents love when they have a case with really all the most relevant information, and they can prepare, call the customer, answer the question as fast as possible. That's a delightful experience. So what we try to do with TurboTax Assistant is actually take this conversation and make sure that when we not only we route it to the right work group of agents that they are skilled to actually answer the customer question, but we provide all the context of the conversation. And the one thing that was an aha moment from us, that when it goes down to a customer to get escalated to open a ticket, and we ask them before we open the ticket, is this still what you want to we want to talk to an agent about? A very large percentage says, no, that's not what I want to talk to an agent about. So we don't know if on the way of the conversation they found an answer, another answer was created, maybe, maybe not. But I think it's critical getting that last point that the customer actually gets to define their problem, getting it all wrapped up with all the conversation in the history and providing all this data to the agents. It does help the agents to actually answer the customer faster. So it's a delightful experience.
Yeah, and just on top of it, when we look at the mundane task, actually, there are 2 types of mundane tasks. Sometimes there should be some piece of at the beginning that we should handle. For example, when a customer calls or when a customer starts a chat, we first need to understand who that customer is, and we need to verify that that person is the real owner of the account, for example. And it might be very useful for us to use the chatbot in that scenario. Or if the case is just modifying a trip, itself is not a hard task to handle, and it can be easily handled by an agent. And this also includes all task itself is mundane, not one piece of it. And separating those 2 things and solving those 2 pieces separately can be very helpful, actually. This is how we try to approach, actually.
Okay. So let me ask another question, which is, if it makes sense to do that, to separate the task, to break it up into reasonable or logical pieces, does it make sense to go the other way? Should the live agent be able to hand off back to a chatbot and let the chatbot finish the transaction or the session with the user?
It's a very good question. And to be honest, I would like to see what customer would think about it. I would like to check with the customers and like to do some analysis on that. Like, I think it's a hard question to answer. Just
okay.
At TurboTax, this is something that we are currently experimenting with, of how do we not only create the callback ticket for an agent to call back the customer, but also escalate in a chat manner to an agent, and actually, or not even escalate, like have signals that the conversation is going the wrong way, and an agent can jump in, provide some clarity, and hand it back to the chatbot. These are experiments that we are actually designing and running right now. We're a very much data-driven company, so we'll see where that goes, but definitely excited about that journey.
Okay. The one thing I will say is I have run across a few instances of that, and it usually is in things where the initial intent has been challenging to uncover, and the chatbot can't do it, and it gets handed off to a human agent who then truly understands what the intent of the user is. And in many cases, what that user is asking to do is to go through a particular process, like applying for an insurance policy or something like that. That lends itself very nicely to handing back to a bot, because then the bot can walk through and go collect all the information that's needed to complete that application for an insurance policy or something like that. So it's going to vary by use cases, but I have seen a few instances of that where it's done and customers are very happy with it. Let's talk about a little bit more future-oriented. What do you see as the big challenges for customer service chatbots going forward? And not so much where is it going to go, but what are the challenges that you're already running into or that you think you're going to run into as you go forward and this technology gets utilized by more of your customers? Nikos, you want to start?
Sure. One of the challenges that, as we're observing conversations, they happen almost real time, the customers don't talk in a one manner intent. They use and I have this, and I have that. And when the conversations have multiple intents, then we have really hard time to actually answer one thing at a time. The technology, the intent classification, and all our tools that we have in our disposal are pretty much doing pretty good when there's a single intent. But customers sometimes don't talk that way, or quite often. The other thing is that our experience is really integrated into the product, and actually really well integrated into the product. It opens on the right side of TurboTax, and when customers engage with the TurboTax assistant, they sometimes ask a question like, where do I enter here? Well, a sentence like that is we have to know where they are in the product, what exactly the field they're trying to enter. It's much more deeper integration, which we're in the process of doing that, by the way. So today we're having challenges like if the utterances are not good enough, clear enough, single intent utterances, we actually miss the mark.
What have you run? I know you haven't actually deployed yet, but what have you run into so far?
I think there are three of them. One of them is already Nikos mentioned. The second one is the world is not one-to-one. Let me explain what I try to say. Usually when we think about chatbots, we think about, I have problem X. Okay, then the solution is problem Y. But in reality, the situation is a little bit different. In our case, for example, we have some cases where customers call us and say, I want my money back. Now, this sentence can mean so many different things. It can be related to the disputed reimbursement. It can be related to earnings. It can be related to like the just guest cancel the trip and try to understand how he or she will get the money back. And to make things even more complicated, like most of those problems should totally be handled by agent from our perspective, and some of the problems can be handled by the chat. But in such a complicated environment, how come we can start to think about from a multiplicative perspective for this one specific sentence and one specific type of intent? And the third one is, there are many intents, and finding the right intent and matching them with the right action is very labor intensive right now, and trying to find a way to automate it is also going to be very important in the future, I guess, to make it more mainstream, if you want to make this technology more mainstream.
Good point made by Nikos and Mehmet. I'd add to that maybe, technology integration, workforce. Technology, like one of the challenges I can see is that nobody has really cracked yet good dialogue management. So when you want to go like up the stack and create like complex business logic with a bot, that's very hard to do with a dialogue flow with like most vendor, for instance. It's one. Two, aside of the easy stuff, when you interact with a brand, very often when you talk to an agent or a salesperson, this person is interacting with 3-4 different desktops with 10 fingers basically. And that's when you need to automate that. Requires a lot of work with integration, with systems very often that have no API, proprietary system, very cumbersome to manage well. And I'd say the last one is probably workforce. You will need to upskill your workforce in a way so that people can become like chatbot tagger, they can retrain, they can highlight anomalies, and it's not been done in the industry yet.
I'll add one more thought because it's not something I hear discussed too much, and it's mostly because we're so early in the stages of the market. But a lot of people think that chatbots are sort of like applications. You know, you put them together, you build them, you train them, you deploy them, and you're done. And the reality is that's not true at all, because from the minute you deploy, there's going to be all kinds of missed utterances that the chatbot doesn't understand. You want to collect those. You want to map those to the intents that you've already built, and retrain the models so that they understand those better. But as you go forward, one thing that people don't realize is you do that and you retrain the models frequently on a daily basis initially, that data set gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And invariably in that data set, there are outliers in the data that confuse the algorithm. And that means the performance of your chatbot begins to decline. So this is not a build it, deploy it, and you're done. This is a build it, deploy it, and manage and maintain it on an ongoing basis. So I think that's a challenge that a lot of organizations are going to have to come to grips with. Let's kind of close out with just, and keep it brief, make it a sentence or two. Where do you see this going, and what's your prediction for the future on how this technology is going to go?
I think it's going to go more and more mainstream as we find better ways of solving the problems that we just mentioned here in this topic.
I think we will find the balance between humans and bots and get the best benefits out of the bots and use humans to actually also answer customer questions. It's all about speed to market, so speed to the answer. So that's what I think is going to go.
And it's hard today, but that's a technology that is here to stay. And if you look at the previous industrial revolution, take like electricity, computer, they all started like complex for a few and became seamless for the masses. So I'm really a believer that conversational AI in our industry is becoming table stake very quickly.
Okay. With that, we've got a couple minutes left. People want to ask a question? Down here.
So my question is, you're talking about experimenting, and we've heard concern about identifying, I'm a chatbot in interactions with customers, that chatbots should identify themselves as such. What about when a human intervenes in the middle of a chatbot conversation and takes over? Are they even identifying that somebody else is in there, another entity, or not? Or does that happen? Do you have people come in and field a couple of questions and then it just goes back to the chatbot flow?
Yeah. So we are experimenting right now, but we're still in the dev cycle. So I don't have real customer data on that yet to tell you. But one thing that I do have is when we first launched it about 10 months ago, our welcome message was really long and made sure that people understand that I am a digital asset and I'm not a human. And then we actually tested, with just a simple hello. And when we landed right now is that we really didn't have to try hard to tell people that this is a digital asset. I think people overall, most of the cases understood that when there's a welcome message with your name and there's options below it, that's probably the digital asset. So where we landed right now is that you can see TurboTax Assistant is not spending a lot of time to educate customers that, hey, I am not real, because we did not see this becoming a problem. I can answer that. So I don't believe the fallback. So if our fallback experience, we obsess about our fallback experience. A fallback experience does not mean that it should not answer the customer question. It's definitely not that I don't understand. That would kill the whole experience, right? So we try to use intent surgically. We try to create intents and flows that actually appeal to the masses, like big questions and big issues. And then we leverage our community. For anything that we don't understand or we don't want the bot to understand, we do want the bot to know to go and get the best content for what we have. We had a situation where we actually created an intent, we wrote an answer, and then we actually said, what if we break that intent, delete that intent, and let the bot go back to the community and grab the most upvoted answer. And actually the second thing actually helped more in answering the customer problem. So fallback is not a bad thing. It's not something that we try to minimize for fallback. We're trying to actually answer customer questions, and we keep tracking the task completion. And if that gets done with fallback experience, then be it. Then we just offer that.
So it's easier than ever now to detect that the person is swearing because we have these robust NLU systems. So even if we don't directly say, oh, I want you to listen for these swear words, they're showing up in the data. And in some cases, they're real. In some cases, the person didn't swear, and it's a mistake that we think they did. We heard earlier that we need to embrace the dark side and handle that by giving roses when we get garbage in. For each of you, how do you recommend handling cases where the person is swearing, especially when we're in a branded context in some cases and we're trying to deal with having good customer service?
It's interesting. That's not a use case that we develop for on the customer side. That's a use case we develop for the agents. And today, so it's good to know that only 2 to 4% of the calls are basically actively listened by someone for quality management. It becomes 100% once you have NLU basically monitoring these calls. It's not a punishment. It's not like you don't listen to the call to basically say you swear or you did that. It's mostly to improve training and do ad hoc training, and also to optimize agent satisfaction and increase retention by making sure people stay engaged.
Okay, with that, I'd like to ask everybody to thank our panelists. I certainly enjoyed it.